Israel and Iran have agreed to a ceasefire, ending 12 days of war. The truce was announced last night by President Donald Trump, with Iran agreeing to cease its missile attacks at 7 a.m. Israel time, and Israel halting its Operation Rising Lion 12 hours after that. Just before the first phase of the ceasefire went into effect, Iran launched a final barrage of missiles, with one striking a Beersheba apartment building and killing 5 people. A tragic scene in Israel as first responders removed 4 bodies from a building in Beersheba that suffered a direct hit from an Iranian ballistic missile. The devastation was enormous. ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian is on the scene, even watching his crews search for a body.
So a ceasefire was supposed to be in effect, but just a little while ago, we just got notification that there was an Iranian ballistic missile launch once again this morning, as these crews here in Beersheba are still working to locate people inside. As you can see, there are people actually pulling out some of the rock that's probably blocking some type of entranceway. It's a whole crew of an assembly line. We have people all the way up on the roof still searching, where you can see this direct Iranian ballistic missile made the direct hit right on top. And we know that 4 people were killed here. Everyone here was pretty much in their shelters at the time, doing everything that they were supposed to do in order to survive this. And officials believe that likely the people that were killed were the ones that took the direct hit to their bomb shelters on the backside of this building. President Herzog arrived to the scene to see the destruction for himself.
That missile, which is one of the heaviest missiles of the Iranians, it's called Qadr. It's way above 400 kilos. Landed here specifically to kill women, children, old age, and people of ordinary lives. Demolished kindergarten and school, demolished apartments, and unfortunately had a heavy toll of 4 innocent civilians. I want to express my heartfelt condolences to the families.
Now, we know that 6 waves of Iranian ballistic missiles came through early this morning, and the one that impacted this one was the second wave around 5 a.m. Here's what first responders also had to say when they first arrived to the scene.
First responders, the Israel police, got here at the very second that they got the dispatch call. They were the first to arrive here. Our bomb squads cleared the area of secondary explosives and the missile fragments so that the search and rescue teams can start their efforts to find civilians who are trapped underneath rubble. It's not even a matter of opinion. It's a matter of fact. You've been arriving to the scene just like me to find that we're in hearts of residential communities that have been targeted. Behind us is a residential building that took a hit, but just a few feet away from me, a few meters, is a school. And behind us this way is another residential building with its windows blown out.
It's absolutely devastated here. Yet another day of Israelis displaced, another day of Israeli heartbreak, and so many people now having to figure out what to do next in a situation like this.
Now, today's ceasefire agreement came about through the efforts of U.S. President Donald Trump, who this afternoon warned Israel not to continue its airstrikes on Iran, tweeting, quote, "Israel, do not drop those bombs. If you do, it is a major violation. Bring your pilots home." And Trump had this to say to reporters.
I'm not happy that Israel's going out now. There was one rocket that I guess was fired overboard. It was after the time limit, and it missed its target. And now Israel's going out. These guys got to calm down. Ridiculous.
ILTV's Devo Klein has more details on the deal and the reactions to it.
Once again, the news came in a dramatic announcement from President Trump on social media late Wednesday night. The tweet read, "Congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire." Trump informed the world before any confirmation from Israel and Iran that the ceasefire process would begin at 7 a.m. Israel time, with the halt in missile attacks from Iran, with Israel following suit 12 hours after that. Shortly before the ceasefire went into effect, Iran launched a last-minute wave of missiles that killed at least 5 Israeli civilians in Beersheba. Only then confirmed it had accepted Trump's truce offer. And just an hour after that, Iran broke the truce by firing ballistic missiles at Israel's north. This after Prime Minister Netanyahu's office released its own message saying that Israel had achieved all of the goals it had set for Operation Rising Lion, and that in full coordination with President Trump, Israel has agreed to the president's proposal for a bilateral ceasefire, but adding that Israel will respond forcefully to any violation of the ceasefire. Trump's call for a ceasefire came soon after limited missile attacks by Iran on U.S. bases in Qatar and Iraq, in retaliation for the American airstrikes on its nuclear facilities. The Iranian attacks caused no damage or injuries to U.S. forces, appearing to be a face-saving gesture for the Tehran regime in order to pave the way for today's ceasefire. However, not everyone in Israel welcomed news of a truce. Avigdor Lieberman, head of the opposition party Israel Beitenu, said that, quote, a ceasefire without a clear agreement will only lead to another war in 2 or 3 years, under much worse conditions. But for most Israelis, after 12 days of war that claimed at least 29 lives, wounded hundreds, and left thousands homeless, news of a ceasefire offered the relief of a return to something like a normal life.
And just ahead of the ceasefire, the Israeli Air Force struck missile launchers in western Iran, ready to fire at Israel. The action prevented an even larger deadly barrage this morning. After Iran broke the ceasefire this morning, the Air Force also launched a minor strike north of Tehran. The ceasefire brought the 12-day Israeli air campaign in Iran to a sudden halt after causing massive damages to the Iranian nuclear and ballistic missile programs. More in this report from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
If the ceasefire holds and the war with Iran comes to an end, it will be largely a story of the massive damages of the campaign caused by the Israeli Air Force to Iranian military leadership, nuclear facilities, and strategic military assets of the Ayatollah's regime. After effectively taking out air defenses, the Air Force roamed freely with dozens of fighters taking part in waves of attacks on nuclear facilities, missiles, and launch sites, and even some key symbols of the Iranian regime. Early this morning, ahead of the ceasefire, the Air Force was operating in western Iran, striking missile launchers that were ready to be fired at Israeli territory as part of the barrages of missiles launched today at Israel. Officials say that the airstrikes prevented an even larger missile attack on Israel. This afternoon, after a call between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, Israel called back a planned response to an Iranian violation of the ceasefire this morning when it fired one rocket toward Israel that was shot down. But before returning to base, the Israeli planes carried out a single strike on an Iranian radar post north of Tehran. The Air Force revealed yesterday's extensive strikes on Iranian military and regime targets in Tehran. The IDF released video of key assets and symbols of the Iranian regime being hit, including facilities of the Revolutionary Guard, the notorious Evin prison, and the destruction of the Israel countdown clock. Since the start of the conflict, Israeli officials said that regime change was not a goal, but could be a byproduct of the war. The Washington Post reports that only hours after Israel began Operation Rising Lion, intelligence operatives began a campaign against senior Iranian officials aimed at destabilizing the Iranian regime.
And for more on the war and the ceasefire, we are joined now by Gabriel Nerona. He is a fellow at the Jewish Institute for National Security of America and a former special advisor on Iran at the U.S. State Department. Gabriel, thanks for joining us. First of all, let me just get your immediate response to the breaking news today of this ceasefire.
Well, it's a surprising end to the war that we would have it happen this way. I think the Israeli system was expecting sort of surrender negotiations, but what President Trump wanted was a very clear and quick end to the war, and that was a lot for political reasons back here in the U.S. But also, I think it's important to not neglect the fact that Israeli air defenses were under a lot of stress, and there was interest from the Israeli side to wrap this up. Obviously, the Iranian side wanted to avoid the pummeling which they were receiving. But I see this as a temporary measure. This does not solve the underlying issues. This does not preclude future Israeli strikes into Iran in the future. But what it really does is it takes the U.S. out of the equation for the near future, making this more of an Israeli-Iranian conflict down the road.
Well, since you raise it, Gabriel, and you say it's a temporary measure, how do you assess that Iran is going to hold to this ceasefire and then, of course, cease its activities to obtain a nuclear weapon or attack Israel in various ways?
Well, I think they have a lot of interest in abiding by the ceasefire on the Iranian side, just because they have very little air defenses left. They're totally exposed throughout the country. And so they were wanting the reprieve much more than I think Israel was wanting to give that reprieve. I think in the months to come, you'll start seeing intelligence operations resume. You'll start seeing terrorist activity come back. But I don't think that you're going to see sort of missiles flying from Iran to Israel anymore because, again, of that asymmetric advantage that Israel has. The nuclear program is the big question. Iran has a choice now. Do they want to repeat what we just saw over the last 12 days again and again, or do they pivot to purely funding and operating terror proxies, trying to rebuild their constellation of Shia proxies and try to re-encircle Israel, or do they go the risky path towards a nuclear breakout? They've also realized that without a nuclear weapon, they are incredibly exposed. And so there's going to be a large number of calls inside Tehran for building a nuclear deterrent to prevent another assault like this by Israel. The question is, do they want to risk it, or do they go a bit more stable and secure path of more conventional and terror network prioritization?
All right, that is the big question. Now, Gabriel, one sort of consequence of the war is the U.S. stepping in, launching this strike on the Israeli air defenses. That is certainly going to be a historic moment in, for example, the U.S.-Israel alliance. But we've also heard President Trump today being somewhat impatient with Israel's military actions against Iran. How do you assess the U.S.-Israel alliance going forward?
Look, I think this was a huge boon to it. What President Trump was able to do was show that he was able to end the nuclear program himself. He gets the credit for it, which is important to him. And he maintains massive political sort of cohesion within the Republican Party. He's completely sort of deterred his critics who claimed that there would be a massive World War III and that thousands of American soldiers would die. And so those critics have been entirely allayed. And the pro-Israel movement has been completely buoyed, completely validated in their view that a strike on the nuclear program would not have devastating consequences for the United States. And so this is going to give that side a lot more political leeway to convince Trump in the future that supporting Israel is both the right moral and political choice, but it's also the right strategic choice and will not have negative repercussions for the United States. So I think you're going to see major support for Israel continue in the years to come. However, at the same time, Trump can now sort of say, I've done my part. I've helped Israel in their major quest. Now it's up to them. So I think you're going to see those two competing interests in President Trump's mind.
Right, and as you said, there was no regime change, but Iran certainly was weakened. How do you see the impact on the region beyond Israel, on the Middle East?
You know, if I'm any of the Gulf countries, I'll see two things. One, I'll see Israel's massive and decisive victory over Iran as an impetus to ally with Israel to try to get more of their military cooperation to ensure that I'm never the target of an Israeli operation. And two, I'm going to see that Iran's threats are really quite weak. That even their one strike on an Arab country only landed one missile in an non-residential area, and that there's not that much to fear from Iran, especially now that they're down and out. All of that, I think, will give a lot of strength to the idea of Arab-Israeli normalization down the road. The Gaza issue has now sort of faded in the public mind as the Iran issue has replaced it. And ultimately, we could see a repeat of what we had in 2020, where Ayatollah Khamenei is the best supporting actor for the Abraham Accords and is actually the impetus for stronger Israeli-Arab ties.
All right, Gabriel Nerona of Jinsa, thank you for joining us on ILTV. Now, this is a moment to stand strong with Israel. In times of great challenge, true support is measured by action. You can go to israelbonds.com now to invest in Israel bonds. Your investment is more than financial. It's a declaration of support as Israel defends freedom, life, and the values we all hold dear. Investing in Israel bonds is a decisive way to stand with Israel, not just in word, but in commitment. Let the world see where you stand. Israel is not alone. You can invest in Israel bonds today at israelbonds.com. Now, international reaction to the Trump-announced ceasefire between Israel and Iran was overwhelmingly positive. Among Western allied nations, France welcomed the ceasefire announcement with a statement saying it must lead to a complete cessation of hostilities. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz strongly backed the ceasefire and appealed to the parties to adhere to it. Russia said that Moscow favors the ceasefire, but questions whether it will last, while China backed the truce and expressed willingness to help maintain the quiet.
Мы только приветствовать будем, если такая договоренность существует. Но уже после ее объявления были сообщения об ударах, об обмене ударами между Израилем и Ираном. Но давайте сейчас не будем делать каких-то скороспелых выводов на основе обрывочной информации. Но мы за мир.
对话谈判才是解决问题的正道。中方呼吁有关当事方早日重返政治解决的正确轨道。中方愿同国际社会一道，为维护中东地区和平稳定做出努力。
Now, as Israel faces growing security threats, the Israel Magen Fund stands at the forefront, supporting IDF soldiers and vulnerable communities with vital equipment and protection. Born out of the October 7th tragedy, the fund continues to strengthen Israel's resilience every day. Joining us now is David Rose, founder and CEO of the Israel Magen Fund. David, thank you for being here. Hopefully we won't need that equipment in the studio today that you bought. But talk to us about how the Israel Magen Fund is adapting its efforts on the ground now in the wake, for example, of this Iran war.
Okay, so when the attack started on Thursday night, so thousands of soldiers were called up to, to the borders of Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, make sure that, God forbid, someone to infiltrate. And when it comes in, when all these soldiers go in one time, there's a big gap in the equipment that they have to take in, right? And we saw that in October 7th, less now today, but still this equipment that I'm brought over here to the studio is needed.
Yeah.
It's equipment that soldiers are missing. Not saying they don't get it. This is better equipment, newer equipment, efficient equipment. If it's a helmet that can protect the soldier's life. If it's a ceramic, this thing over here.
Right, we should explain that is actually sort of a bulletproof vest, a part of a bulletproof vest.
That goes into this vest over here.
Right.
Fits into this, and that protects the soldier. And this is basic equipment that Israel Magen Fund has been giving out already thousands of this equipment, right? And it goes on, the requests, we're talking about on a daily basis.
Right.
Since October 7th, we gave out thousands of these equipment, and there's more need for this.
So what kind of impact is that having now, and how can people who are watching this on ILTV support your work?
Right. So first of all, you can go to IsraelMagenFund.org and look at our website, look at the programs. These are programs that are going on now. This share with you a couple, like 2 stories, right? Quickly. I get a phone call from a soldier. I'm going back into reserves. Can you give me one of these vests? Okay, sure. Go pick up in the store. I'll pick up the bill, right? 2 days later, another soldier calls up in the same unit. Says, and he tells me, by the way, we're 20. Says, okay, 20. I came and bought 20 of these things, 20 of this. I mean, I came there, one of the commanders goes, by the way, it's only 1 unit by us in the Pluga. We're missing, I said, okay, do my count. We came up now to 50. Starts off from 1, ends up with 50. Another soldier comes off from a different unit, is also missing. That's one story. Another story of a guy from Givati, standing in his store, American Eagle on Friday, talking to his girlfriend, I wish I had a pair of protective glasses. Now, my kids always make fun of me. It's like, you know, Dad, just mind your own business. Other people's conversations. I said to me, you need Rudy? Okay, I'll help you. You're a soldier? Yeah, sure. He says, okay, how many? You need 1? Yes. I said, by the way, since we need 20. Who are you? He says, we're a Givati unit that 2 weeks ago we lost 3 of our friends in an explosion in the house. Now, for me, that means we can do everything we need to do for them. I drop everything. Okay, what do you need? He gave me one. Doesn't mean the glasses. Yesterday I met him, a hug, a kiss, whatever. That's what Israel Magen Fund is about, is caring.
Right.
And if it's your own kid, or anyone's child, and I look at everyone's children, all us, going into the field, don't have this equipment, we need to support it to them. We need to make sure that they are safe, they're alive, and come back to the parents. I have a kid now right now in Gaza fighting. I want to make sure that all the kids have this kind of stuff. Thank you.
David, those of us with family members now serving the IDF know how important this work is from the Israel Magen Fund is. So please give your support. David Rose, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Now, with the ceasefire between Israel and Iran announced on Trump's Truth Social account and the American strikes on Iran early this week, Israeli citizens and officials are thanking President Trump and the American army for their contribution and cooperation with its longtime ally. ILTV's Devil Klein has more.
The Knesset, Israel's parliament, lit up red, white, and blue in a show of gratitude to the Star-Spangled Banner. Knesset Speaker Amir Ohana did not spare praise for Trump, calling him, quote, the greatest president in modern history. And in another gesture of gratitude, the Old City Jerusalem walls lit up with American and Israeli flags. The Tel Aviv municipality building also joined, lighting up its walls with the colors of the American flag. And on the Ayalon Highway in Tel Aviv, you can't miss this massive banner reading, "Thank you, Mr. President." Israeli citizens are also posting gratitude toward Trump on social media. This IDF soldier fighting in Rafah posted this picture with his MAGA hat and proud American flag. And on the Lebanese border, the American flag is seen waving high and proud together with the Israeli flag. The United States military operation in Fordo will mark yet another milestone in the iconic and historic bond between Israel and the United States. Unbroken and undeterred. American values will always align with Israel, making this bond more than a diplomatic alliance. It's a stance for freedom, for democracy, for peace, and for truth. As President Trump said,
God bless the Middle East, God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much.